afternoon, everyone. Looking into decentralized finance for 2.0 run-up in cryptocurrency. Ran into this article, MasterCard joins blockchain digital identity alliance. I didn't know what the Trust Over IP Foundation was, but it includes Accenture, Evernym, IBM, R3, that's private blockchain out of Singapore. But we're all familiar with ID 2020 to provide a digital identity for everyone. Now this is somehow lumped into the COVID credentials initiative to develop immunity passport. You're going to have to pay for this monthly or quarterly. At least some prices are coming out between $20 and $90. This was first pushed by the airlines, electronic travel authorization, to make sure you wouldn't infect anybody on the plane. COVID credentials initiative, deploy privacy-preserving verifiable credentials. This is where it gets deep and strange. Now 60 Fortune 500 companies formed their own self-sovereign identity groups to make sure that we all get these immunity passports. At least that's a surface layer, because when we get into the universal registrar, otherwise known as a decentralized identifier, it goes deep and it keeps rewinding to the same companies again and again, from the finance to the operating systems. And the thing standing in the way right now are these interoperable overlays, because it's all about getting you registered on this thing and somebody else to oversee you as a guardian. This is where we tumble down the rabbit hole. Individual organizations willing to take legal responsibility for managing the agent wallet on behalf of the person under guardianship, meaning you're owned by somebody in the corporate world. Self-sovereign identities, decentralized identity, overseen by Sovereign, the Identity for All Council, I4A. And the guardianship means you're an owned piece of property. They're going to digitize individuals, organizations, natural things and man-made things. You want to touch any of that? You're going to have to be using V code. And to give you an idea of the money and backing behind this, these are just the players in Singapore that are bringing this to life. Australian politicians say you won't be able to partake in any type of everyday life if you don't get this COVID passport. RFID chips are not mandatory for now, but you shall not buy, sell, or trade without this mark. So the purpose of this video is to try to blend two different technologies, with the cryptocurrency and the decentralized blockchain, and the switch of money during this COVID crisis. As you can see across the predictive programming media, looks like lockdown 2.0 is going to be inbound, and when that happens and the economy locks up across the planet, there's definitely going to be a shift into something different. So I've been looking at a DeFi, which is decentralized finance, knowing that cryptocurrency is also going to have a rise during this run to the dollar and shakeup of the economy and everything financial. And if you remember 2017 with all the ICOs in the run-up, it looked very much like this, where it was flat, it got a couple bumps, and then off to the moon. And I was really interested in the way Visa was sort of moving in the direction of doing digital asset service plans. Now, this was a way to get digital signatures and cross-platform identity services that were trusted, quote unquote. And this could have been done on the blockchain with a certain set of protocols in order to be able to unlock or transfer funds. It wasn't like a multi-signature wallet, something completely different. I'm really interested in the way that this technology is moving forward, because I think it's going to be part of our world. And it seems to be taking a nefarious turn, where things that were supposed to be freeing humanity are now going to be used to put it in chains. So what we have in the first part of the video here, talking about the COVID passport, that's now, literally now happening. They're going to want you to get the test to be verified to move on public transport. What's coming in the beginning of 2021 is the last part of the video. And these two are blending into expediency, or the next lockdown 2.0 is going to usher in the rest of this tech that you are going to be required to adhere to, whether you like it or not. You're going to be owned by a company. So looking into the giant payment systems here, MasterCard joining the Blockchain Digital Identity Alliance, ID 2020. Now, this is a protocol that's put out by Gates and an enormous amount of others that are going to require digital identity. This is the whole thing about getting the star on your driver's license if you're in the United States. You know how they're not going to let you board a plane unless you have this? It's to try to funnel you into this system, because unless you're going to want to not travel ever again, you're going to have to get this. So I went to the ID 2020 website to try to dig out a little more information. Obviously, it's very general, very generic. It just says provide a digital ID to everyone. Doesn't sound that nefarious until you understand what that means about tracking you. But another thing, the way the ID 2020, I thought it was maybe a spacing issue in my computer, but then as I tried another device and notice the ID 2020, how the 2 is chopped off. So for me, that was a signal to maybe invert it and mirror it. So I did a couple combinations here, and then if you double it again, you get this IB8 with some strange symbol in the middle, which I'm still trying to look up. I haven't found it yet, but then you get the 8 reverse BI. So if you know anything about the symbolism here, please put it in the description box below so we can share information. And then beyond the catchy headlines, which most people don't go after, if you read further into it, you're going to see this ID 2020 Alliance is basically started by Microsoft. And then it mixes in all these biometric technologies and digital identities. But then there has to be a storehouse or the technology behind it to run it all. It's not just blockchain, that's its own thing, but then there has to be an interface between that and companies holding on to this information. And that's where we get into Accenture, IBM, Oracle, and the whole gamut of tech companies. And it does seem at the end of this is going to be a global ID system, not country-centric. Now, the way to soft trickle this thing in here is your immunity passport. This is pushed by the airlines. So if you fly for business, you're definitely going to have to get it. If you're involved in the travel industry, you must get it or else you will lose your job. So it's a way for the soft drip feed disclosure into this. Immunity passport, airlines are calling for it, digital ID tracking system. So if you want to ever travel again and get on an airplane, they're going to make you go to your doctor and get a test. And before you can get on the airplane, you have to enter their credentials into some system weeks before or a week before you travel, and this will be on a central database, and then the airlines will have access to it. Now, I don't know how much access they have to your medical records, but they'll have an access to see a positive, negative reading, and that's where it begins. And here's where we tumble down the rabbit hole. Because 60 Fortune 500 companies right now are creating something called the Self-Sovereign Identity Group. And what they're going to do is focus all their efforts into creating these immunity passports, which are going to be required for you to get on a subway or get into a taxi or take an Uber, or if you want to book an Airbnb in the future. You're going to be required to do this. And as I've heard, somebody said that even to enter a grocery store in the future, you'll have to show this, that you're tested negative so you don't contaminate the cans on the shelves or something. So taking a look here at Ledger Insights, deeper dive into the article, these immunity passports, and the whole group spearheading this is called COVID Credentials Initiative, CCI. You'll start hearing about them later on in the year. September, October, this is going to suddenly pop out of the woodwork here. And again, you're going to start seeing these same names repeating, rinse and repeat. It's as if they create new groups, rinse and repeat, and they start another one, but they're the base for the monetary resources into the whole gamut. There's all these 25, 30 companies set up, but it's all the same companies that reset up different companies to make it an illusion. That's a tiny little initiative with just a few people sitting at a desk trying to push this because they love humanity. But it's always Microsoft, Consensus, IBM, Oracle, all the big payment processors, and it's all about aggregating data, storing your data, and having access to your data. Medical data, which I personally am not down with. If an airline can pull your medical records, you can chase down any of the leads you want. I am doing a very brief surface view of this, deploying privacy-preserving, verifiable credential projects. So you can't verify your identity anymore with the government. It can only be through these private companies that are going to tell you how you have to verify and how you have to pay for this every time you want to verify. And see, when I first started looking into it, it was 60 organizations, and then 100, and now it's more than 200. So a perfect example of this being deployed right now is in China, where you see the girl there. She has her phone turned toward you. It has a green mark on it, which means she's allowed to travel freely, get on a subway, bus, whatever, go into stores. If that's red, they won't let her on anything publicly. So I was wondering, how much is this going to cost? Are all these companies going to eat the cost and just do it for free because they love humanity? Of course not. Now, this is going to be forced by law in the future. The Immunity Pass card or the Immunity Pass digital itself, the physical card's $20, and the digital app that goes along with it is $80. So since most American media is talking about being tested monthly, you can look at this as having a $90 monthly test to prove that you're not infected wherever you go. You get the card with it. It's a nice looking card. But see those barcodes and the QR code on there? This is where it gets a little bizarre. Because anybody can check on you. Anybody who has access to this data system here. All they have to do is either scan either of those, and then boom, your identity is going to come up. And everything about your medical history associated with the COVID inside this thing. Plus, they're going to know your name, your address, your identity, your birth date, the height, and all these things about you biometrically. Now, it's anybody who has access to the system, and that's going to be millions and millions and millions of people. So nothing could go wrong with that, I'm sure. So how it seems to work so far here is you're going to get a color code assigned to your ImmuniPass based on the test results that you have to go to your doctor yourself and get, and then you put it into ImmuniPass, and they enter their credentials for you, whatever the scan code was off of your medical results. White is not tested. So this is interesting. Why would they have a code for no test unless they're going to give this to everybody as an ID, and then wherever you go, if it's white or you didn't get tested, you're not allowed in?